You know, I'm very thankful that I grew up in the time that I did, coming up, born in the late 50s, you know, and growing up in the 60s and 70s. And I love looking back at some of the things that came out of the 60s and 70s. And as you look at some of these pictures, I hope it just brings back some memories or opens your eyes to some things that we're still using today came out of that time period. I love the K-Tel records. You remember those advertisements? You know, the K-Tel 20 greatest hits, 20. It was the first attempt where they took various artists and put them all on one album. And I was looking at one of the YouTube commercials this week, and you could get an 8-track tape for $7.99 of some of the greatest hits. And I did those things. I thought that was awesome. But who in here had a Vegematic? Had it. Some people, early service someone says, we still do. You know, the Vegematic, it slices, it dices, you know, and all the things it does. The ShamWow, you know, that was guy was just so hyper, and because something would wipe up liquid. You know, but I love that. My favorite, absolutely favorite, was the Ginsu knives. I just loved the advertising went along with that. You know, you could cut a cinder block in two with that knife, and still it would slice thin potatoes. You know, I just absolutely loved that. You know, but out of the 60s, 70s, we got disco dancing, Barbie dolls, bell bottoms, go-go boots, lava lamps, mini skirts, smiley faces, and afros. All came out of that time. But one thing that I remember that came out of that time was the peace symbol. Now, I don't know if, you know, there were two recognized peace symbols of that era, and one was the V, and that we know where we came from. That actually has been used in different times through history for mean different things, and some good and not so good. But through World War II, Winston Churchill gave the V for victory. That we're going to win this war. But somehow that adapted and became the peace symbol. But the other, there was the cross there that I remember that the youth group that I grew up going to, we were told that was a sign from the devil. You did not use the peace symbol. So it was, can't use the peace symbol. I tell you, I tried to do some research of it and stuff like that, and I couldn't find anything that said that's where it came from. It actually was kind of born in 1963 by a man who was against nuclear. It was nuclear disarmament, and it has a reason for the way that was designed for that. So I don't know. Maybe I was the only youth group in America that you somebody shaking your head didn't. I don't know what it meant, but peace symbol. One thing's for sure: we didn't get peace in this world from the 60s, the 70s, the 70s, the 80s, 90s, any decade, any time. We didn't get peace because of that. We have peace in this world in our lives because of what Jesus Christ did. God is the giver of peace. You know, when we think about what Jesus came to do, that he came to restore what sin and man had destroyed. By sending his son to down the cross to pay the price for sins, to give us the hope, those who accept that gift of God, who respond to it, that we have the promise, the hope of eternal life. That's where mankind was brought back together with God. The peace was made that was originally attended to and was shortly there in the Garden of Eden. But the real question for us Christians today is this: once you've made peace with God, how do we live in peace? How do we keep that in the forefront of our mind? How do we maintain a life of peace? Now, I'm not talking about that one day you're a Christian and next day you're not and you're going back. That's just not how salvation works. I'm talking about how you live as a person that's been made at peace with God. How do you keep a consciousness, an actual consciousness every day that God lives within you, that his presence is in you in the Holy Spirit? And when he says that we should live in peace, that you know what that means. The passage that we're going to look at today contains two, I don't want to say suggestions, but instructions, commandments for us how to live in peace, how to know that peace and maintain that peace in our lives. Two steps that we can take that shows it keeps the peace of God ruling in our lives every day. That we'll never lose our peace if we do these things in God's name. Now, we're going to spend all of our time in these few short verses. We're going to turn to like one other scripture the whole time. So if you want to turn there in your Bible, that's where we're going to be. Use the Bible on the back of the pew in front of you, however you want to. And the scripture is going to be on the screen as well. Let's begin with Philippians 4, verses 6 and 7. He says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." The first thing I want us to see today is that peace comes through prayer, not worry. Peace is going to come through prayer, not worrying. What he says here, he says, do not be anxious. The Greek word here means when he says do not be anxious, it just simply means do not take an interest in. Do not entertain the thought of worrying about something. You know, we're talking about sayings from the old times, but back in the 60s and 70s are still alive today. There's kind of a newer one over the last decade that says, ain't nobody got time for that. And that's what Paul is saying. He says, you ain't got no time for this. Don't even entertain the thought of worrying about these things. Anxious means agitated. Don't be agitated about these things. And it's the same word that we get the word worry from. So when Paul says this here, he's literally saying, stop worrying. Isn't that so easy for Greg Sexton to stand up here today and say, don't worry, stop worrying. So easy to say. But our lives, we know they're more complicated than just somebody standing up and saying, don't worry. That each of us have something that can cause us to be anxious. Something can be it just happened. It can be stretching out over years or whatever it is. But all of us understand that. Before you dismiss it that I can't help but worry, let's take a look at what Paul says here and entertain the thought and see if you think that it is possible to not worry. Well, why would Paul include this here in his letter right now? Why would he say this? Well, what would the Philippian church have anything to worry about? Well, let's just think about a few of the things we've talked about over the last couple of months as we work through these 4 chapters. They had to worry about actual physical persecution for being Christians. They had to worry about the problems that was in the church, the disturbance, maybe a possible split coming because of the people choosing sides, or these two people that were having a disagreement in the church. They would have to worry about the false teachers who were trying to come into the church and lead them a different way. They would have to have the thought or the cause to worry about the self-centeredness that was showing up in the church. And there's even the illusion that some of the people were experiencing financial troubles. Add to that the everyday temptations that every one of us face. And for these people in Philippi, this was a brand new lifestyle to live this way and follow God. So they didn't have a thing in the world to worry about, did they? Anxiety is a soil which grows discord. Anxiety, worry is the soil in which discord grows. Matters that might have been able to be kept small and dealt with, when we worry, they just grow and grow and take on all new proportions. I was reading about a gentleman that was in the hospital because he was having some emotional problems. So he was in the hospital, and the nurse came to his room and she opened the door. He was over against the wall, just listening against the wall. And she observed him for a little while, and then she says, "What are you listening for?" And he said, "Shh." And he turned back around and was listening, and he finally went, "Come here." And she walked over, and he said, "Listen." So the two of them are standing there with their ear against the wall, and they listened for a while, and she finally said, "I don't hear anything." He says, "I know, it's been like that all day." You know, sometimes when we worry, we build things up and we get things out of proportion. And Paul doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want things to grow and be bigger than they are. He didn't want their problems in Philippi to become bigger than they were, and he doesn't want ours either. And that's the kind of thing that worry does. It agitates us. It complicates the solution. Worry is not a solution. Just listen to some of these statistics of surveys that have been taken. 40% of the things people worry about never actually happen. So we waste 40% of our time worrying about things that never happen. 30% of the things people worry about happened in the past. So therefore we have no control. We can't change what happened in the past. 12% of the things people worry about are health related. So when we worry, we complicate the health related problems we have, plus refer back to the first statistics. 40% of the things we worry about don't happen anyway. So it's really no need to worry about health. 10% of the things people worry about concern other people. And we definitely have no control what other people do or what happens to them. And that comes down to only 8% of our worries. The worries that people have are based on reality. 92% of the time, the things we worry about never come to be or we have no control over. Or are we left with the belief that you're either a worrier or you're not? Are you one of those people that say, but you don't understand, I came from a long line of worriers. I have an associate's degree in worrying. And we feel like those that worry are just going to be worriers, and those people who are blessed say, well, I don't worry about anything, that's just how they are born. I agree, I admit that we're born prone to one way or the other. But it doesn't mean that we're left to have to deal with the amount of worry in our lives, that there's not some control over it. Paul here says one of the solutions is prayer. And just like when Jesus taught the Lord's Prayer, he gave a pattern to go by. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thy kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. He gave a pattern for things that we should approach and include in our prayer. And Paul does a lot of the same thing here. Notice how he mentions about the prayer. He says in everything by prayer and petition. Prayer is just recognizing I'm talking to God. That I'm getting to talk to God. Petition is not demanding something. It's recognizing that there is someone with higher authority than me, and I'm bringing to them a desire that I have. That's a petition. He says, do it with thanksgiving, realizing that whether this thing works out the way I want it to or not, God has blessed me beyond belief already. Thanksgiving. And he says, and present your requests. Those are the specifics that you need to ask God about. And he says, bring those things to me and everything. This is how we erase the need that we feel to worry, that we talk to God about those things. We bring them and leave them with him. We're not denying, when we do not worry, we're not denying that we don't have problems. We're just saying, I want to deal with these God's way. And prayer comes with a promise. There at that same scripture, verse 7, he said, and the peace of God which transcends all understanding will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Another word that goes along with worry, the Greek word from the root, means to divide. When we worry, it divides us. It divides our mind. And we don't pay attention to what we know. We get distracted to what we already know that God has told us. Coffee drinkers, you'll know what I mean by this. One of the things first things I look forward to when I wake up in the morning is that cup of coffee. And I came out, it was just like last week, I was out here and I'm a K-cup kind of guy. You know, I love to make that K-cup coffee. So I plug the coffee in, I get my creamer, I get it, everything right. I push down the lid, hit the start, and I walk back to my office to do something. I'm going to come back and there's going to be a cup of coffee waiting on me. What I came back to was coffee all over the counter, down the cabinet, and in the floor. K-cup contains a hint. You need a cup. If you do not put the cup under decay. It does you no good. You just have a mess to clean up. How many of you have ever done that? Tell the truth. Okay, all right. Forgot to put the pot or the cup under. You know, my mind was divided. I was trying to do too much, and all I ended up with a mess. Prayer keeps our mind and heart tied to God. It keeps us from being distracted, confused, and we avoid coffee on the cabinet. In the section in Matthew chapter 6, the Sermon on the Mount, there's a section that Jesus talks about worrying. He addresses the people over worrying, and he uses such wisdom and logic. And he talks about the things that the average person would worry about. He says, don't worry about what you're going to eat. He said, the birds eat. And he said, don't worry about what you wear. He says, he even compared it, he says, God clothes the fields with these beautiful flowers, and Solomon and all of his splendor and wealth never looked as good as the flowers in the field. And he goes on and says this, one of my favorite places to see what he's talking about and to see the logic is in Matthew 6:30. He says, if that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? That logic. He's telling us, don't worry about these things. If I went to the care to grow grass and flowers and everything that's just here for a small amount of time, don't you think that I'm going to make sure that you're clothed and that you're fed? My friends, this is the definition of living in peace, that we face those struggles of every day and are at peace about them. Prayer improves our memory because we remember what God has promised us. We come to that state of mind and heart where we say, God's got this under control. Then you live in peace. Prayer binds us to God. You may not be going through the exact same things that the church at Philippi were going through, but you're going through something. And things that can pull us to be worried, to be anxious, to be divided about, they're present for you and they're present for me, just like they were to the people Paul was writing this letter to. When he says it will guard your heart, it means that he will give you a guide, he'll guard you, he'll protect you, he'll give you clarity, he'll sustain you, he'll strengthen you, and he'll show you the purpose for what you're going through. One of the most common things that we say when somebody's getting ready to part from our company, to leave us, is we say, be careful, be safe. We'll say, be careful now. Maybe we should change that to when they are leaving our presence, just say, be prayerful. Because God is going to take care of those needs. Be prayerful. He goes on and tells the second element of a worry-free life. He said, we learned that peace flows from right thinking or having the right mind. Verses 8 and 9, he says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Second time in these few verses we read, he promises peace. So when he says get your mind right to consider these things, it says get your head on straight. Be thinking the right way about these things. Put your mind in the right place that you're not thinking of all the bad things. Think of the good things. Some people would call this positive thinking. I just call it what Paul said it was. Think of the things that are good, true, noble. And I also know that common sense tells us that what we spend our minds on has a tremendous effect on us. What we think about, we will eventually become. Where our thoughts are is where we are. And our thoughts shape our behavior. I mentioned it many times that I'm not always a fan of social media, but I saw this on Facebook this week, a quote. It says, most of us have chosen, talking about Christians, it says, most of us have chosen heaven over hell, but not many of us have chosen heaven over earth. That's one of those indictment statements to Christians that we need to stop and go, is that how I'm living? See, it's an easy choice to choose heaven over hell. But I'm afraid we live like we're choosing earth over heaven. That we try so much to squeeze every bit of life and every bit of experience and everything out of this life that we soon are living a life where we're not even thinking about or striving towards the heavenly things, the eternal things. That the things we do now, we don't even give thought to, does this bring glory to God? And God just keeps on blessing us and blessing us and blessing us. And it just takes us further away from Him because we're not thinking, we're not mindful of the things of God. These things can capture our minds and lead us away. Everyone is familiar with fog. Actually, this morning when I came to church, it was just a slight amount of fog covering the ground. And you know how difficult it is to be in a foggy situation, trying to drive. If you have a flight and then be grounded or whatever because of the fog, that you couldn't do that. You know how fog affects our lives. But let me ask you this. For an acre of land, just kind of picture an acre of land. You know, your yard, your backyard, whatever, you know, you got an acre of land. Do you know how much water it takes to cover an acre of ground in fog? Would you think 5 gallons of water? A gallon of water? More? 1 glass of water. It's all it's contained in an acre of fog. It's the millions and millions of water particles that makes fog what it is that's present. And you go, how could 1 glass of water be dangerous? Well, we're reminded of that in January of 2020 when NBA great Kobe Bryant and his 13-year-old daughter and 6 others on a helicopter took off in a fog bank, a cloud. And what they determined pilot error was the pilot had spatial disorientation. In other words, what it means when you get completely covered where you can't see any way, we can very easily come just so disoriented that we may think we're going one way and we're going the other. It's a true thing that happens. And he thought that he was pulling up to come out of the cloud, but he was actually banking to the left and flew right into a mountain. 1 glass of water, one decision, how it can fog our minds. One thing that we do or we ignore that can fog our thinking, to make us make choices, to cause us to make choices that we would never, ever considered. Maybe very things that we've taken vows, commitments that says, I'll never do that. But when our mind is not right and we're not thinking as we should, we never know what we can do. Paul lists here the things to think about and to focus on. And this is the wonderful sidebar for me to mention here. That's why it's so important that we come together and we study together, 25, 30 minutes on a Sunday morning. But I'm not even going to touch these things. So sermon's never enough. These are the things that we go home and you study on your own. You look, and what are these things? And what am I thinking about? So there's never not a time to study God's Word. So I encourage you to do that, to think about these good things. And I love that he says, once again, 2 times in these few verses, you will have the peace of God. That's a prayer with a promise that we'll have peace in these things. 2 steps to live in peace, to maintain the peace, to be conscious of God's presence in our lives, is to pray and to think what we should, to think about the right things. back in the early days of aviation, seemed to be constantly somebody was trying to fly further, cross country, fly to Europe, fly around the world, and that was a common thing in the early days. And on one of those endeavors, one of the pilots in these single-engine planes was trying to set a record. When he took off from one of his stops along the way, he had just gotten up and going good and got several hours out from where he took off from. He began to hear a gnawing sound. And he realized immediately that while on the ground, a rat had gotten into the inner workings of the airplane. And that just kind of would make us think, eugh. But he knew the danger of it, that a rat could gnaw through a wire or a cable that would cause him to crash. And he had hours left to be in that plane. What was he going to do? And he came up with the idea that he began to increase his altitude. He began to climb and climb and climbed above the clouds and got to where the air was so thin that he eventually heard the gnawing stop. And he knew that the rat could not breathe in that air, and it died. Let me tell you something. Worry is a rodent that just gnaws away at the peace that God has blessed us with. And it will take so much of your life, so much of my life, if we allow it to do that. But worry, like a rodent, cannot survive, cannot live, cannot thrive in the high altitude of the most holy God. He cannot survive in that atmosphere. So it's our choice today that as you face your trials this week, and I face mine, and I don't know all yours, and you don't know all of mine, the things that could drag me down with worry, that I choose to fly high and in the secret place of God, that He'll carry me through that, and He will do the same for you. That all begins with, if you're outside of Christ and you've not made peace with Him, it begins by giving your life to Him and accepting Him as your Lord and Savior. And from there, we begin that walk of life where we trust Him in prayer and in our thinking.